Hello, good morning. Welcome to Useful Idiots Monday morning, where we go over respond to the Sunday morning news shows that we watch so that you don't have to. I'm one of your hosts, Katie Halper.
And I'm Maté.
And everyone remember to like the stream. That's doing your part, being part of the effort to fight against algorithmic suppression. And also make sure that you join us right after this. We go to Callin, which is a free app that you can download onto your phone if you don't already have it. The link to this Callin is in the description of this video, where we will be talking about things more in depth and also taking some of your questions. So you can do that right after, because we know that you can't get enough of us, and that after an hour of us on YouTube, you're jonesing for more. So you go over to Callin, and that's where you get us. Also, just quick things. I saw someone say free Assange, and I think I can say this, right, Aaron? I think you'll be in support of this. But on April 10th in Washington, D.C., I'll be part of a free Assange, Stand Up for Assange stand-up show. That's about it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Katie, am I tripping, or do I see a dislike button back on YouTube now?
Well, let's see who did that. Just make sure that we just blocked the F out of anyone who did that. I'm just kidding. Who the hell?
Didn't the dislike button go away?
Oh.
Is it back? I think it's back.
Is it back?
I think it was always there. It's just people can't see who disliked it now.
Oh, because they're cowards, of course.
Yeah. It'll hurt our feelings.
I'm sorry. I thought they got rid of the dislike
I thought they did too, actually.
Yeah.
Well, how many questions do we got?
No, I still get to see it from our analytics page every week. It hurts my feelings.
Oh,
okay.
Disgusting.
Well, anyway, welcome back, dislike button. I thought you were gone, so it's good to see you there. Everyone, please don't hit the dislike button. Please, it will kill us. It will crush us.
Yeah.
Only hit the like button. It's like kryptonite.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Hit the like button. Look, that's an emergency siren for what happens if you don't hit the like, or if you do hit the dislike.
They'll come to take me away.
Yeah. Dislike counter is gone. Someone wrote in the comments.
I see.
Oh, I get it. That's interesting. Well, thank you, Jeebus Christ. Thank you for liking the content. I hope that everyone is liking this content. Smash that like button. Mm-hmm. All right. So should we just get on to the show? All right, let's do it. And we're going to start as we frequently do, with a little bit of Tuck Chod action at Meet the Press. Mm-hmm. We're just going to start with his intro.
This Sunday, a challenge to Putin. President Biden issues a warning to Russia.
Don't even think about moving on one single inch of NATO territory.
Then says Vladimir Putin has to go.
For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power.
This as Ukraine successfully begins pushing Russia's forces back.
This is the war between light and darkness, between goodness and evil.
Gaining ground around Kyiv and Kherson, and leading Russia to announce it's scaling back its military goals, even as the civilian death toll climbs.
The most traumatic question I had from my kid is why Russians try to kill us.
I'll talk to Ukraine's ambassador to the United States, Oksana Markarova, about the fight on the ground and Mr. Biden's fiery speech. Plus, Supreme Court theatrics.
Okay, you can stop.
Nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Oops. All right. All right. Cool. So, then is this the YouTube clip, Matt, or is this the tweet? Because
this is the YouTube. This is the full show.
Okay, great. So then if you go to 154, please.
Chuck Todd. Good Sunday morning. The biggest news President Biden made yesterday was at the very end of an otherwise well-received speech. Just as he was wrapping things up in Warsaw, Mr. Biden made this startling statement about Vladimir Putin. For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power. Perhaps he said out loud what we've all been thinking. But a White House official tried to clarify that presidential ad-lib, saying the president's point was that Putin cannot be allowed to exercise power over his neighbors or the region. He was not discussing Putin's power in Russia or regime change.
Okay,
right.
So
sure.
yeah, I don't.
Okay.
This is that's an interesting intellectual exercise. The president's point was that Putin cannot be allowed to exercise power. Right. Yeah. Right. He wasn't talking about his power in Russia. For God's, yeah, that's very convincing. I also like the way Chuck Todd is like, he's saying out loud what we've all been thinking. It's like, no, he's saying out loud what you've been thinking and you've been saying on the show, which every week you do when you basically say, but can you make a deal with someone who doesn't want peace? Or, but can you negotiate with someone who wants to eliminate you, which is a variation of what he says on this week's show, as we'll get to later. So yeah, I thought, what did you think when you heard Biden say that?
Yeah, when he says what we're all thinking, he means like DC Beltway, media hacks, and neocons. That's what he means.
He doesn't even know that he's incriminating himself by saying he's been fantasizing about regime change.
Regime change, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Other people are thinking, can we avoid nuclear war, please? Can we do that? Is that okay?
Not Chuck.
Yeah.
Those people, you know what those people are? Those people are cowards.
Yeah?
Yeah, they need to be fearless like Chuck.
Chuck,
the brave, the valiant among us want regime change, and the cowards among us don't want nuclear war.
They're afraid of World War III, yeah.
Yeah.
Perhaps, but let's see how he receives it. We do have a new NBC News poll on Ukraine, the economy here at home, and President Biden, and a lot more. And let's start with Ukraine. By a fairly large 71 to 28% margin, Americans say they do not have a lot of confidence in President Biden's ability to respond to this war. 57% say we are already at war with Russia.
How can you not have confidence in Joe Biden's ability to wage war?
For God's sake.
Just this week, he said that if Russia commits chemical weapons attacks, then the U.S. will respond in kind. Meaning that the U.S. will commit chemical weapons attacks too. Then he said that. Then he told a group of U.S. troops that in Germany or wherever he was in Europe, that he was talking about Ukraine, and he said, "You're going to see it soon." Basically, telling infantry, airborne, fighter pilots that they're going to be bombing areas of Ukraine soon. And then he made the gaffe about, admitting that he wants to see regime change inside Russia. So how could people possibly
not have confidence
in this man's job?
It really, it's that right-wing echo chamber that Brian Stelter always warns us against. That's what it is, distorting reality.
Or will be within a year, a very pessimistic view. 34% disagree. What's more, 68% would prefer Mr. Biden make the economy his top priority, compared with just 29% who want him to focus on ending this war. Overall,
wow, people are concerned with issues that impact their material well-being and not the cause of ensuring that Ukraine stays a NATO proxy state on Russia's border.
Cowards. Bunch of cowards.
Yeah. Crazy. So then, given that, how can Chuck say that ending Putin's regime is on everyone's mind when his own polls clearly show that people are sick of the war, they don't like how Biden's handling it, and they want a focus on the economy?
It's a good question. I mean, Chuck isn't the most analytical thinker. I'm not going to lie. I don't think that he thinks about that.
Well, what he thinks about, remember, is having ambiguity about the full evil and the lesser evil. Remember that quote from a few weeks ago?
I mean, honestly, it makes me uncomfortable that you brought that up. It brings a lot of discomfort.
It's another callback.
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever. What was it he said at the end? Anyway, whatever.
I guess, whatever. Anyway.
I guess, whatever, which is kind of one of my favorite moments. It was the most redeemable Chuck Todd moment when he realized how full of shit he sounded and he just kind of walked it back. Yeah. Tried to hide it in more platitudes. Yeah. All right, let's keep going.
Oops. President Biden's job approval stands at just 40%, with 55% disapproving. This is his worst showing yet in our poll since he became president. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces have pushed back Russian troops, apparently forcing Russia, at least publicly, to claim that they're going to scale back their military goals and focus solely on the disputed territory in the east. Our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, is actually...
This is an interesting line, and he talks about Russia scaling back its military goals. He has no idea what Russia's military goals are. We were told by people like Chuck Todd that Russia wants to overthrow the Ukrainian government, although I never saw any signs of that. If they did, they would have, cut off communications, bombed the presidential palace, done all these things like the U.S. did in Iraq, but they didn't do that.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can say confidently that Russia scaled back its military goals, given that Russia was pretty vague. They talked about demilitarization, denazification,
yeah,
and protecting the Donbass region. So I don't think you can say that they've scaled back their goals. Not that means that things have gone great for them, but it's this idea that, like, U.S. flooding Ukraine with weapons helped Ukraine avoid regime change. I don't think you can say that.
No, I mean, it's just, look, you know how he knows what Russia's going to do? Because it's straight out of the Russian playbook, Aaron.
Straight out of the Russian playbook.
Yeah, he has a copy of the Russian playbook. Yeah,
that's true.
We don't have a copy. And thank you, Hichi Boy,
in
for
eastern
the
Ukraine now. And Richard,
super chat.
we know what the Russians say, right? But right after they say it, all of a sudden, missiles hit the West. What is really going on with the Russian military strategy?
Well, the Russian military strategy seems to be all over the place, and they've been having tremendous battlefield failures. And I think this claim by the Russian military command was a way to claim some success out of obvious failure, saying that their real focus is in the East. The East happens to be the only place where they've made some consolidated gains, particularly around the port city of Mariupol. So the one area that they are holding territory, they say that was their intention all along. But it is not clear at all that Vladimir Putin has given up on his overall war plan, which is to topple the government of Ukraine, to get rid of Zelensky. And I think that strike in Lviv showed that clearly.
How does he know that? How does he know that Putin's overall war aim is to get rid of Zelensky when they've been negotiating with Zelensky this entire time? And again, they didn't bomb Kiev. Like they haven't tried to take the capital. They didn't bomb Kiev's residents. They didn't bomb the Ukrainian parliament. I mean, all the things that the U.S. did when they tried to topple Saddam Hussein, Russia hasn't done. So, I mean, maybe Putin wants that. I don't know. But how is Engel so confident, given that they haven't done anything towards that end?
RPB, Aaron.
RPB, what's that?
Russian playbook.
The Russian playbook.
Straight out of the Russian playbook.
Classic Russian playbook.
It is really, it is quite stunning to see people confidently talk about stuff as if they know this, as if they have any proof of it, like not even saying what it looks like or it seems like. They just say it as if it's a fact. It's really disgusting and disturbing. Okay. Let's go back to that. Where are we with that? I just put it out of the way.
It may have also been a strike aimed at President Biden, a bit of an insult to say, we're going to strike right near the Polish border while you're in Poland, making some bold claims and making some insults at Vladimir Putin, calling him.
No, it's pretty obvious, by the way, why Russia made that strike in Western Ukraine. They hit a fuel depot, and they're hitting a fuel depot because fuel supplies military convoys. And so they want to take that out. That's why they did it. I don't think they were sending a message to Joe Biden. I just think that they were, pursuing their military strategy, which Richard Engel doesn't really seem to understand, even though he's NBC's chief foreign correspondent.
The expert, yeah. Of course. And then he refers to, that's funny. Someone wrote, Aaron pretending he doesn't know RPB. Nice try.
Got me. It's true.
Because obviously Aaron has a copy of the RPB himself.
I was playing dumb. That's out of the RPB. That's out of the RPB.
Yeah.
You don't know what the RPB means.
Yeah.
Okay. A butcher, among other things.
All right.
Richard.
So he thinks that he bombed it because his feelings were hurt because Biden called him a butcher.
Yeah.
It's a little bit problematic, the Russian butcher trope. Just as I just mean more as a profession, not as a war crime. Anyway, it's stereotype. Okay, so I think we're done with that clip, right? Let's go. Unless you want to add anything?
No.
Okay,
I'm good.
We're just blown away by how much we've learned from Richard Engel.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to go to the reaction that from this panel to Biden's comments.
A classic Meet the Press panel where
it's a great
you
panel.
have 3 neoliberals and 1 neocon, and everybody agrees with each other.
Yeah, it's great.
Michelle Sindor, moderator of Washington Week on PBS, and of course, an NBC News Washington correspondent, former Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson, Stephen Hayes, editor.
By the way, Jay Johnson, another thing about him, he's not just former Homeland Security Secretary, he's also on the board of, say it with me now.
I don't know, Raytheon or what?
Raytheon, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, but why mention that?
Well, it's of course. It's a little, that's just a small detail, not worth mentioning.
Yeah.
And who is Stephen Hayes? He is the genius neocon who wrote the book, The Connection, How Al-Qaeda's Collaboration with Saddam Hussein Has Endangered America.
Yeah. So he's basically one of the people who argued that Iraq was behind 9/11.
Yeah.
So
and he gets
great
rewarded
panel.
with a panel slot on Meet the Press.
Yeah.
And he's now a contributor at NBC News.
Yeah. Awesome.
Of the Dispatch and USA Today Washington Bureau Chief Susan Page. Susan, the comment, the ad lib heard round the world, literally, walking it back, saying it, everybody seems to agree was not the right thing to say at the moment, but everybody's thinking it.
Well, true, though a Washington
Everyone.
as we were saying, where you accidentally say what everyone already agrees is true, but distracting. What are we talking about today? Not the impassioned defense of democracy that the president delivered, but his final 9 words, where he seemed to be calling for regime change. Distracting, undisciplined. And we'll find out whether it is.
She was wearing a yellow jacket. I didn't think of that. Ukraine. She just needs some blue in there.
Dangerous, whether it is damaging, whether it causes some kind of reaction from Moscow that would not have been coming just as a result of calling Putin a butcher and a war criminal.
Quite the walk.
The Chiron is blue, which is Biden presidency.
You're right.
The Chiron's blue. So that's kind of Meet the Press's way of making sure that solidarity is displayed.
And the mug is blue, so she probably knew that. She didn't have to come in with blue. Yeah.
It's quite the walk back, and you have the White House really making it very clear that he was not advocating regime change. You had Secretary Blinken come out in Israel also saying that. But there's also a sense that this was a window into what President Biden really thinks and feels. This is after he was holding refugee children. This is after he has met with all these people. And this is after he called President Putin a butcher and a dictator. So in some ways, the logical conclusion, apart from, of course, official U.S. policy, would be the average person thinking, of course, he should not be in power. That said, it is distracting, as Susan said, because now the White House and Republicans, you see Rob Portman calling it a mistake and others jumping on the idea that he made a gaffe.
I'm going to.
So, okay, well, let me not interrupt because I want to give the stage to this next speaker.
I'm not sure I would have walked it back. He's a war criminal. He's slaughtering innocent men, women, and children. He illegally invaded Ukraine, and he has got command and control of nuclear weapons. Such a person should not remain in power.
So he's lost his legitimacy, in your mind?
More than lost his legitimacy. And at most, I would have modified the statement by saying it's not a statement of our policy. It's just simply a statement of fact. But, you know, I'd like to see us at some point get to a place where we're not constantly disclaiming the line over which we will not cross. And he said it, you know, presidents every once in a while do say things that ad lib. Reagan was famous
Evil
for this.
Empire, right?
Evil Empire.
That rattled their cages, right?
The bombing starts in 5 minutes, remember that?
Yeah.
So it was a statement of fact. Virtually everyone agrees. Everyone in the Western world agrees.
Yeah, I think everything the secretary says about Vladimir Putin is correct.
Okay, there's so much there to unpack. One is he doesn't want to see people disclaim the red lines, which we won't allow people to cross. Why quibble about it? Just commit. When dealing with a nuclear power, you should just be bold. Go big or go home. Say that if you do X, Y, Z, we're going to retaliate. And stop being such a baby about it. It's really, it's obscene. It's obscene.
I love that a Raytheon board member is upset about war crimes.
I know.
He's a war criminal. He's a war criminal. My entire company's business depends on war criminals. We arm Saudi Arabia as they commit mass murder in Yemen, kill far more people than have been killed in Ukraine.
Yeah, but he's our war criminal.
Right. Yeah, well, we're gonna see a clip. We're gonna see a clip about that that speaks to that later on. But yeah, and again, it's just taken for granted that everybody in the West has the same point of view about Russia.
Right. That we all believe in regime change.
Yeah, everyone believes in regime change. Everyone wants to see a proxy war in Ukraine. Everyone thinks that the U.S. has done nothing wrong by pushing NATO expansion and using Ukraine as cannon fodder. This is all just taken for granted. And it's easy to do that when you never have anyone on your panel who disagrees with you.
Right. And we're gonna see the extent to which there's pushback coming up right now. But yeah, Giant Rock points out war criminal and control of nuclear weapons. Which president are we talking about? Fair point. Unclear. Okay. Let's go back to the panel.
I mean, clearly he shouldn't be in power. It's one thing to say something true. It's another thing to wonder whether it was wise to say it. And it does, as Senator Portman points out, play right into Russian propaganda about the U.S., about the West, about NATO. You know, they have long made the argument that NATO is an offensive alliance that represents a threat to Vladimir Putin, represents a threat to Russian sovereignty. And the U.S. has said, no, that's not what we're about. This seems to, I think, feed that. And that's a concern. It also has a domestic effect. If you look at the number of times that President Biden...
How could you possibly think that a hostile military alliance on your border that refuses to let you as a member and surround you with weapons pointed at your capital could possibly be a threat to your country?
You'd have to be a conspiracy theorist.
You have to be a conspiracy
theorist. Think that, yeah, like QAnon. It's basically the Russian equivalent of QAnon.
Yeah. And NATO, after all it's done for the world, you know, when the intervention in Yugoslavia, the intervention in Libya. I mean, how could you possibly think that NATO is a threat to you after all the good that NATO has done? It's crazy.
Yeah, it's that Russian psychosis.
Had walk back things on this trip, 3 significant statements on this trip alone. And then you go back further and talk about his comment about a minor incursion. Mm-hmm. He has said things repeatedly that show, I think, the lack of discipline that some people had about concerns about President Biden or Joe Biden as a candidate.
And, you know, that may be one reason you have that incredible 71% number in your new poll that Americans do not have confidence in President Biden.
I was surprised
to handle the situation.
By the size of that number.
That includes some of his supporters. That includes a fair number of Democrats. And the idea that White House officials, first anonymously and then the Secretary of State, kind of clean thing up, I think reinforces the idea of, does the president, can we trust him to respond in a competent way to this war?
It never happened during the Trump administration.
Is the president sane? Is the president sentient? Yeah, unclear.
Right, unclear. And this makes me feel a lot better. Thanks for saying this, Jay.
To say something true, it's another thing to about the U.S. threat to Vladimir. If you look at the number of times he has said things repeatedly.
Democrats and the idea that, does the president, can we trust him to respond in a competent way to this war?
Of course, never happened during the Trump administration.
Well, it's particularly...
Hardy har, never happened during the Trump administration. But Trump, yield but Trump. That, you know what that doesn't do, the but Trump thing? Win fucking elections.
Well, and that's the point, right? There's so many things. That's what's so funny about the Biden administration is there's so many things that Trump was accused of doing that you also can pin on Biden. These gaffes that embarrass the country and that give away the game. Like when Trump said, we're there to take the oil in Syria. Right. You know, Biden's had his own versions of that too. Having a compromised family, like the whole thing with Trump was his family's corruption and profiting off of his government position. Well, look at Hunter Biden and the lucrative board seat he got in Burisma. And just recently, the laptop was once again confirmed to be authentic. So there's so many things that were pinned on Trump that you also could pin on Biden as well. And that's embarrassing for corporate media and especially people like Chuck Todd, who kept portraying Trump as this like singular, unique character when really there's been so much continuity with Biden.
Right. Yep. Really shameful. All right. Let's go to the next clip, which is we got Face the Nation reacting to the comments, and we got a comment from Jeffrey Goldberg from The Atlantic.
Oh, another guy who alleged a Al-Qaeda Saddam connection.
Yeah.
Because these neocons are everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
The 9 words, of course, that he must go. He must not remain in power, meaning Vladimir Putin. For God's sakes, he must not remain in power. And then the White House comes out and says, no, he wasn't calling for, he wasn't calling for to be removed from power.
At that point, they probably should not have walked it back and just left it out there ambiguously or non-ambiguously, as the case may be. The argument that we're hearing is that he didn't mean what the plain meaning of the words are. And you know, and it is. I mean, look, the speech was a very powerful speech. It's true. It is also true that when you're calling for regime change in a nuclear state, that's a policy that you might want to think through before you do it. And Joe Biden, as a veteran of the Obama administration, obviously, understood that how presidents can get tripped up by rhetorical flourishes. President Obama and the red line, for instance.
Which was a response to a question. It wasn't a planned statement.
Right. And you know, all sympathy to Joe Biden. These trips are difficult. This is an emotional moment. And of course, how could you not want a monster, a person he describes as a monster, to be removed? Nevertheless, this is a nuclear power, and a person who's in a corner and has nuclear weapons is a more dangerous foe than one who doesn't feel like he's in a total corner. And so it's a tough moment.
Yeah. I was actually surprised that he said he feels like he's in a corner. It almost sounded like he thought that maybe that's not a good idea.
For Biden to say that, yeah, no, he was saying it was a bad idea. I mean, it's funny, like they all advocate the policy of regime change, basically.
Right, just don't say it.
Now they're uncomfortable when it gets articulated by the president.
Right. Yeah.
They're like, we want to overthrow the president of a nuclear armed power, who, by the way, according to polls, if we can believe them in Russia, has the support of the majority of his population. Of course, that can never be mentioned. You can't mention what do Russians actually want right now. But they're like, yeah, we support that, but we just don't want it to be said out loud. The whole saying it out loud thing. Yeah, let's not do that.
Yeah. And we got one more response I thought would be interesting to look at. Well, two more, but let's go to David Petraeus, because I thought this was actually kind of interesting. This is from this week at ABC. And this is an interesting response.
Ask you about that, because we saw President Biden's speech in Warsaw outline this basically as the struggle, the fight of our time. But there was that line at the end of his speech where he said flatly that Putin must go, that this man must not remain in power. Obviously, that's not the policy, but how does something like that, and made headlines all around the world, how does that complicate the efforts to resolve this situation?
Well, I mean, it reminds us that message discipline has its virtues. That was reportedly very clearly an unscripted moment, in addition, in the emotion of that very emotional moment. And, you know, it will cause some challenges down the road. It will disappear, you know, the headlines will move on to something else within a few days. But in the mind of Putin, someone who has, you know, watched and rewatched, you know, old videos of Gaddafi being taken and killed, this kind of thing, it will play on his mind, and it could complicate matters going down the road.
I just thought it was interesting that he actually acknowledged what NATO did in Libya to Gaddafi.
Yeah.
Which was, you know,
and
basically enabled the Saddam.
I'm pretty sure he was head of the CIA when all that went down. David Petraeus is just has so much blood in his hands. He oversaw the surge in Afghanistan. It was his genius idea to basically team up with Al Qaeda in Syria to fight Assad. Him and Hillary Clinton, that was their doing. And I'm pretty sure he was the head of the CIA when the U.S. overthrew Gaddafi, and Gaddafi was murdered, sodomized with the bayonet. So
under
that's
NATO
interesting.
Fire.
It's interesting that he would bring that up.
Yeah. Sometimes military people are I guess because they're so entitled, they don't see anything wrong with what happened in Libya, right? So he's just like, well, you know, if you're Putin, you may be scared of watching the, you know, brutal murder of a sovereign nation's leader that we orchestrated. So this isn't a good thing for Putin to hear. It's triggering for Putin anyway.
And for Russia, the Libya intervention has a special significance because the U.S. essentially duped Russia into getting on board. Hillary Clinton went to Medvedev, who was the Russian president at the time, Putin at that point was the prime minister, and said, look, okay, we want a fly zone for Libya, but we're not going to do a regime change. All we want is to protect the civilians of Benghazi who are under threat from Gaddafi. And so Russia agreed, essentially. They abstained at the UN Security Council and gave the U.S. their no-fly zone. Of course, what did the U.S. do? They immediately violated their promises and took it all the way to regime change. And Gaddafi was brutally murdered, sodomized with a bayonet. And Putin, for him, that was apparently the last straw, where he just decided he could never trust the West ever again. And of course, later on, it turned out that U.S. claims of an impending massacre by Gaddafi and Benghazi were completely overblown. There was a British parliamentary inquiry that looked into all the evidence for that, and it found it was fabricated. And so, but this was a serious moment in U.S.-Russia relations, where Putin felt as if the U.S. had taken full advantage of Russia and carried out a catastrophe, because Libya wasn't just a disaster for Libya, but it had huge spillover effects. The weapons from the Libyan government were then sent by the CIA under Petraeus in something called the Rat Line, exposed by Seymour Hersh, from Libya to Syria to arm the death squads that Petraeus was arming to overthrow the Syrian government. And then the weapons also from the Libyan government were spread throughout Africa as well. And so terror groups got them in places like Mali and committed atrocities with the weapons that were pilfered from the Libyan regime stockpile. So there are all sorts of horrible impacts. The Manchester bombing, when that bomber who had fought with U.S. and UK-backed forces in Libya went back to Manchester and carried out a bombing at the Ariana Grande concert. All sorts of horrible repercussions of the Libya war.
Yeah. All right, let's go back. And I'm sorry, I misspoke. I said that something was from Face the Nation. It was from this week before. Okay. Thanks so much for letting the people in Paran know we were watching. Hit like. Thank you, Weblight Studio. Let's go back to Meet the Press. We're going to hear from the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, Oksana Markarova. This is very telling.
And joining me now is Oksana Markarova. She's Ukraine's ambassador to the United States. Ambassador, welcome to Meet the Press.
Thank you for having me.
Let me start with the president's remarks yesterday. And I'm curious what you thought of the ad-lib remark when he said, my gosh, Mr. Putin cannot remain in power. How did you receive that?
Well, we heard President Biden loud and clear that U.S. is and will be with Ukraine in this fight. Mm-hmm. We clearly understand in Ukraine that anyone who's a war criminal, who attacked neighboring country, who's doing all these atrocities together with all the Russians that are involved, definitely cannot stay in power in a civilized world.
Right.
Now, it's all up for all of us to stop Putin while it's still local in Ukraine, because this war is not only about Ukraine. And this brutal aggression that is going on for 33 days now in every city of Ukraine, and especially in cities like Mariupol and north of Kyiv and Kharkiv and others, it's the brutal genocide attempt to eliminate or exterminate Ukrainian nation, but also attack on democracy, attack on anyone who wants to live peacefully in their own country.
President
Aaron, did you hear that? It's genocide and eliminationism.
Yeah, Amy Schumer called it a genocide last night at the Oscars.
Oh my God.
Like, by the way, there's a genocide going on in Ukraine. People got to be careful about that word.
Yeah, I would love to hear her define genocide.
Yeah, no one ever calls what's happening in Yemen a genocide, even though it's a much more appropriate term for the Saudi campaign there.
Right. Well, I'm sure Amy Schumer was like, well, I'm really torn. I can only highlight one thing. And of course, I'm thinking a lot about Yemen. That's really on my mind. I got Yemen on my mind, but I only have time to talk about one genocide. So I'm going to just go with Ukraine because, I'm sure she's just totally torn up about Yemen.
Yeah.
Can you imagine using your fucking voice as a celebrity? I'm sorry. Just anyway, sorry. Just like it's so they really think that they're being good humanitarian people, and they have no idea that there are things that the United States could with the snap of its fingers, and like what's happening in Yemen.
Yeah. We used to have celebrities like Marlon Brando, who, when he won for The Godfather, whatever, 50 years ago now, he refused to accept the award, and he sent up a Native American lady in his place to give a speech about how Native Americans were being stigmatized by Hollywood and not portrayed fairly. And now we have people, just refusing to be dissenters and insisting on going along with the party line. Although Zelensky was apparently supposed to get a slot last night at the Oscars, but it didn't happen.
Yeah, and like Sean Penn is upset now.
Sean Penn's going to burn Sean Penn is going to melt his Oscars.
He better do that now.
He's got to follow up
and show us. Sounds like a meltdown, if you know what I mean. Yeah. All right. So this obviously is a very obvious throwback to Hitler, this talk of genocide and eliminationism, which is something we've been seeing more and more in the media. People really throwing around Hitler comparisons, and not even Hitler comparisons, but like worse than Hitler comparisons. The latest one came from Lloyd Blankfein, who said that even, say what you will about Hitler, but even he didn't use chemical weapons, which again is something that Sean Spicer said when comparing Hitler to Assad. And Sean Spicer had to apologize for that because it's such a fucking dumb thing to say. And not only, by the way, did Hitler use chemical weapons in gas chambers, and if you forget that or you discount that, you're basically a Holocaust denier. But he also used chemical weapons, and Nazis used chemical weapons on the battlefield. So it's not just, it's enough to do it in concentration camps. But anyway, so these people are just absolute ghouls. And obviously, because if you portray someone as Hitler-like, that is justifying World War III. So this gets even more obvious about this later on.
Zelensky seemed to say, hey, words are nice, but we need more than just words. What more do you want the West to do? What are the asks? And not fulfilling these asks, what does this mean to Ukraine's ability to fight this war?
Look, let's look at the facts. For 33 days, Ukraine is defending itself and defending Europe from one of the largest countries, one of the most brutal countries, and a nuclear power, an autocratic state. We are already surprised, many, of the fact that we will not surrender, that we are not only motivated to defend our homes, but we will stand our ground and we will defend every inch of our territory. We need tools and we need all kinds of weapons in order to be able to do so. So while we never asked our friends and partners for boots on the ground, we have the best boots on the ground. Our armed forces...
You're not asking for American soldiers on the ground in Ukraine.
We are not asking for American soldiers, but we need all the support with all the weapons, including the anti-air, including the airplanes, everything to stop this brutal destruction. If you look at everything that happens again, use of bombs, use of missiles, use of prohibited by Geneva Convention weapons everywhere, level in cities like Kharkiv, Mariupol, and others, we need, unstoppable flow of supplies from everyone who's willing to give it to us in order to win.
Earlier this week, there was an accusation that Russia was using phosphorus bombs. Do you have any more evidence?
Look, it's, it's tough. On the surface, a country invades you. You have every right to resist. Ukraine has every right to resist the Russian invaders. They do. But what they're essentially asking for, they're not just asking for weapons. They're also been asking for a no-fly zone. They've been asking for NATO jets. And again, the point is, and this is why Obama did not want to send weapons to Ukraine and why everybody was against him, because Obama argued, I think, totally convincingly, that Russia will always be able to achieve escalatory dominance, that no matter how many weapons you send in, Russia will always be able to win. And the question is, what do you want to continue the war for? What do you want to fight for? Russia is not actually asking to take over Ukraine. It's not asking for regime change, at least as far as we know. Its main demand is that Ukraine commit to neutrality and not joining NATO. That's been its core demand all along. And by the way, Zelensky even admitted last week on CNN, he said that he asked NATO, will you give me an answer whether you'll admit Ukraine in a year or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5? And he said that he was told by NATO, which means Washington, that you will never join NATO, but publicly we're not going to say that. The doors will remain open. So essentially, that was Washington saying that we're going to use this threat of you joining NATO to essentially bait Russia.
Right.
And for the sake of not caving to a Russian demand, we're going to keep the door open, even if we have no intention of actually fulfilling it.
Yes.
So it's so cynical. So do you want to wage a war over that? Is it worth destroying you, having your country destroyed? I personally don't think so. For people in the Ukrainian government, it might be worth it. But if you were to ask most people in Ukraine, which has historically been very divided between people who want to be a part of NATO, people who don't, are you okay with accepting neutrality to end this war? I'd be surprised if it wasn't the majority of the country.
Also, yeah, that's the United States and NATO admitting to Ukraine, you are our pawn.
Yeah.
It's really fucking sad. And I see some people in the comments, someone asked if we're going to acknowledge that Russia invaded a sovereign nation, which we've acknowledged and condemned. Basically, every time we've talked about this, I'm a little frustrated by the fact that people think that we need to say that. It's literally a description of what has happened. I don't think it's our job to remind people of that. If you watch the media, you just may get a sense that Putin has done that. And you just may hear people condemning Putin as Hitler. So I don't personally think it's my job to remind people of something that's indisputable that we've already condemned on the show. Someone else said, no matter what, Russia's the aggressor, which, okay, and what? Does that say, just saying that out loud save Ukrainian lives? How does that end the war? Like, I don't care what you think. You could think of that Putin's a Hitlerian aggressor. I mean, I would very much disagree with you, but just tell me how that helps fucking Ukrainians. That's my big question. I find this a little frustrating. Like, what? It's just virtue signaling. What does it accomplish?
Right. I have that Zelensky clip. Let's hear it.
Okay, yeah, let's watch it. Yeah, perfect timing for me to get out of my soapbox while Aaron gets something of substance.
Requested them personally to say directly that we are going to accept you into NATO in a year or 2 or 5. Just say it directly and clearly, or just say no. And the response was very clear. You are not going to be a NATO or EU member, but publicly the doors will remain open.
I'll run that again.
Just say it directly and clearly, or just say no. And the response was very clear. You are not going to be a NATO or EU member, but publicly the doors will remain open. Requested them personally.
The response was very clear. You're not going to be a NATO member, but publicly the doors will remain open. So they've used Ukraine to bait Russia, basically, by keeping the door open to potential NATO membership that they have no intention of actually fulfilling, while signing agreements to bring Ukraine into NATO, while pouring weapons into Ukraine to make it ready for NATO membership. So all this was done basically to bait Russia. Is that worth a war that destroys a country? I don't think so, but if people disagree, they're free to have that opinion. I just don't.
I would just prefer they not try to drag us into World War III for the sake of not just because, and again, this to me, something that's so missing from this discussion is you care about Ukrainians, then you want to negotiate. That's what you want. You don't want to further vilify Putin. That just gets you literally nothing. So it's not.
And there's also the question of again, for many Ukrainians, this war did not begin when Russia invaded. Right. There's been a war going on for 8 years in which over 13,000 people have died. And the U.S. has fueled that with billions of dollars worth of weapons. And this is the catastrophic end game. And the question is, do we want to keep doubling down and fueling it more? Or is it time just to make peace? And again, given that Zelensky knows that Ukraine, or at least he's been told that Ukraine will not be joining NATO anyway, why not just put that in writing?
Yeah, right. Though, Aaron, I really got to commend the media for constantly talking about the 14,000 people killed since 2014 and fighting.
Yeah, they don't exist.
They've never, those civilians, or, some of them are civilians, some of them not, right? But those deaths, well, I guess they are mostly civilians, right? Those numbers?
I don't know the exact tally. What I do know is that since 2018, the vast majority of the civilian casualties have occurred on the rebel-held side of the Donbass war. That's the breakaway republics of Donetsk and Luhansk. 81.4% according to the UN, of civilian casualties in that war since 2018 have come on the rebel-held side.
But I thought we support rebels. I thought we supported
Not in
separatists
Ukraine.
who want national determination.
Yeah, not in Ukraine.
Right.
No.
Got it.
All right. What's next?
Oh, okay. Well, can we just fast forward to that? I just want to get can we go to 540? So she says during the state, she says there's no end. Well, let's go to 435. Sorry. I just think that of the same clip.
Can you imagine ever agreeing to recognize the Donbas region as an independent republic?
Well, there is no independent republics on the territory of Ukraine. Russia attacked us in 2014. Russia illegally occupied Crimea and part of Donetsk and Lugansk. Russia illegally are waging full-fledged war on the independent country now. And the question is bigger than that. Can anyone, there is a respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, which is a firm basis for any UN charter or any international organization. So I think we shouldn't ask Ukraine what we are ready to give up in order for Russia to stop this aggression. All of us should be asking each what are we prepared to do to stop it? Because if we lose this, it's very important. If Ukraine loses it, it's not only Ukraine's lost. It means that brutality, oligarchy, and war criminals prevail on our planet.
Let me go back almost to the thing that we started our conversation. Let me start with the president's remark.
Imagine that. Imagine that. Imagine the
Imagine that world.
And war criminals prevailing. Yeah, look, the sad thing about this is that Russia's demand now is that Ukraine recognizes the independence of these breakaway republics. But that wasn't always their demand.
Right.
Up until the invasion. So up until last month, Russia's demand is simply that Ukraine respect the Minsk Accords, which was reached back in 2015, which simply calls for limited autonomy for these breakaway republics so that they actually stay inside Ukraine. So Russia's official position was to keep Ukraine's borders intact, with the exception of Crimea, which it took in 2014 after the U.S. backed a coup, and the coup government was talking about joining NATO, and Russia didn't want its most important naval base in Crimea falling into NATO hands. But with the exception of Crimea, the Russian proposal was to accept the agreement that Ukraine formally already committed to in Minsk, which would have given limited autonomy to the Donbas region, but kept it within Ukraine's borders. The reason Ukraine didn't want to implement it is because that would have given the Donbas a veto over Ukraine joining NATO effectively. And so that's why they didn't want to do it. And that's why Russia put no pressure on Ukraine to implement them. And that's a big reason why we're in the situation we're in today.
Right. Okay, now here's Chuck Todd's favorite question.
Oligarchy and war criminals prevail on our planet.
Let me go back almost to the thing that we started our conversation with, which is, can you live next door to somebody who tried to eliminate you? Like, can you imagine this ending in some form of peace with Putin living next door?
Well, look, we have the experience in Europe.
So he's basically saying, how can we not have regime change?
Yeah.
Right.
And just to be sure, should we use nukes to make sure that Putin is wiped out?
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
and here,
what does he want? What does he expect is going to happen?
He wants world. I guess. Yeah. I guess. Yeah. I know. It's interesting.
If you can't live next to, if you can't live with Putin next door, then either you have to pick up the entire country, move it somewhere else, or you have to wipe out Putin and his country. It's one or the other.
Yeah. Well, maybe it'll be an internal thing, like Lindsey Graham is calling for.
Right, like have regime change. Yeah. Okay, great.
Internal without. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
good luck with that.
Here she is, harkening back to history again.
With World War II, there was another Putin is another Hitler who tried.
Putin is another Hitler, Aaron. Did you know that? There was another Putin. His name is Adolf Hitler.
Tried to do that. Attacked sovereign countries, crossed the border, tried to eliminate, and the world.
Tried to eliminate? This casual use of the word eliminate for someone who has no ethnic cleansing intentions.
Post-World War II created a new security system, which apparently is collapsing right now. Yeah. So unless we together stop Putin and create new type of security guarantees, because we are not going to move from that place. and Russia is not.
Let me ask you about our promise to take in 100,000 Ukrainian refugees.
Okay.
Is that enough?
That's it.
Should
So
we be,
there you go.
Or more is?
Well, this is funny because, of course, 100,000 refugees is not enough. Obviously.
Oh yeah, we should.
Millions of credit, but watch her not criticize Biden for that.
Yeah.
This happened sooner rather than later.
Well, we already see more than 3.6 million refugees in Europe everywhere. It's mostly women and children, and the majority of them want to go back. So the focus for us is sanctions, weapons, so we can stop Putin and start rebuilding Ukraine. But of course, we are grateful for everyone, and I'm glad that the U.S. is joining also, the group of countries that not only are helping us a lot with weapons and sanctions, but also opening the doors for Ukrainians. Now, whether it's going to...
Weapons and sanctions are the priority, though.
Yeah. Weapons and sanctions is what we need.
Yeah.
And letting in 100,000 people, it strikes me that the U.S. could let in more than that if they wanted to, but... Yeah, obviously,
especially if they're escaping from a Hitlerian butcher.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but the priority should be letting people go back, and the way to do that is not sending more weapons to keep the war going, but just to end the war in a reasonable way that's on the table. But they're not willing to entertain that yet. It looks like.
And it did. I think I forgot to point out her turn of phrase "unstoppable." What she was asking for, which was an unstoppable flow of weapons.
That's right. Yeah.
Unstoppable. Yeah. All right. So then we got some more stuff. What do we got next, Aaron? We got
about the President Biden.
Michael Morell.
Oh, this is funny. So this is Michael Morell, former acting director of the CIA, on Face the Nation.
Speech in which he said that Vladimir Putin cannot remain in power. He also framed this conflict as totalitarianism versus freedom. What did you make of those two remarks?
So I think his comment that Putin had to go was an unforced error. It strengthens Putin at home, makes it difficult for any domestic opposition to coalesce together. And no Russian citizen, none, wants to be told by the leader of Russia's main enemy about what their leadership can look like and not. The broader framing I worry about as well. I think we should frame this narrowly. Russia out of Ukraine and impose so much pain on this man that he never thinks about doing this again. I think framing it as democracy versus autocracy drives the Chinese closer to the Russians and makes it difficult for some of our own allies who are autocrats to stand with us.
All right, we're going to have to end it there. Mike Morell, thanks so much.
Isn't that awesome? For all this highbrow talk about, oh, we love democracy, that's all we care about. Here's the former acting director of the CIA admitting that actually, our allies are autocrats, so it's not a good idea to claim.
We don't want to autocrat shame. We can't autocrat shame.
Yeah, that's what he's basically saying. That's some refreshing honesty. He also says that most Russians don't want to hear from the U.S. who their leader should be, which is exactly right. And this is surprising honesty from a former CIA director.
Right. All right. People are going to be really happy about this next clip because they want it. They say to us, "Give me Stelter," and we're giving them some Stelter.
He's back.
All right. It is true that Morell
the time here on CNN
be refreshingly honest.
Yeah, Morell also said that he wants to kill Russians and Iranians in Syria. He said that's what we should do. We need to kill more Russians, more Iranians inside Syria.
I mean, how could that go badly? Yeah, what could go wrong there? Yeah.
Why not?
All right, the stealth.
Most of the time here on CNN, we look outward and focus on the world's stories. But here, we carve out a little time to look inward at the roles of the media and how the media affects you. It's a tradition that began 30 years ago this month. 30 years ago, Reliable Sources was born.
Welcome to a CNN special. I'm Bernard Kalb.
Did you know, Katie, that Reliable Sources is 30 years old?
I had no idea.
Yeah, I mean, to Brian Stelter's credit, I don't think I've ever heard of it until he took it over.
Yeah, he really put it on the map.
Yeah.
Reliable Sources is what this program is called, and the title tells it all.
Thanks to Bernie Kalb and original panelist Howard Kurtz and original executive producer Rick Davis, Reliable Sources was born. Not much lasts on TV for 3 decades, but Reliable is now the longest running program in the history of CNN without any interruptions. Inside Politics earlier, but it went off the air for a while. So RS has been reliable on CNN's schedule because media issues are universal, and they're
I don't know if you caught that. I'm sorry to be a little juvenile, but he called it RS, and to me it sounded like he said RS.
RS, yeah.
Yeah. But I imagine he's got to have a much bigger head than I thought he did, because he's now the host of the longest running show on CNN. He's probably walking around with major swagger inside CNN headquarters. Yeah, I'm the host of the longest running show on CNN right here.
No, NBD.
Yeah.
No big deal, yeah.
NBD.
always evolving. As you can see in the very first episode, panelist Marian Golden called for more fact-checking by the press. Why, she said, are news outlets policing campaign ads, but not speeches?
But I'm wondering why we have gone to be a truth squad for these ads and not done the same or similar analysis of press conferences, debate statements, speeches, give and take.
These days, there is a lot more truth squatting. So slowly but surely, media criticism can improve media diets. In that first episode, it began with a conversation equally relevant today about anonymous sources accusing a high-profile figure of harassment. I believe our biggest value add here is to inform people about how the media really works, why reporters do what they do. Because the best critiques, the strongest arguments about improving the press are based on knowing how it operates and why. We all rely on some form of media, and we're all members of the media now with broadcasting tools in our pockets. That's the point of...
Wow, Katie, did you know that your phone is essentially a broadcasting tool itself, and it's a way of communicating with the outside world, and you can create your own media every single day just with your phone.
From your pocket.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've tried to bring to this program, building on Calb and Kurtz's critical lens on the media. By the way, Calb just turned 100 years old, so if he's watching right now, happy birthday and thank you, Bernie. Later this month, just in time for this show's 30th birthday, we're going to expand again. You know, we already have a newsletter now and a podcast in addition to the flagship weekly show. And on March 29th, when CNN Plus launches, we're going to expand into a weekday form. Reliable sources daily on the CNN Plus streaming service.
Reliable sources daily, everybody. You cannot get enough of Stelter, so he's giving it to you every single day. Reliable sources every single day.
Every single day. One day we'll build up to that.
Yeah.
We should try to pitch CNN Plus to carry us.
Yeah, I think CNN Plus is only for it blows my mind. Nobody watches CNN anyway, and
So
they're
we're
like,
gonna give you more of it.
Let's take the network that nobody's watching for free. That's on TV for free. Let's bundle that into a subscription service where people have to pay to watch the network that they're not watching anyway, with all the same shows.
Yeah, just more of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Will give us space to cover all the stories we can't fit into this hour on Sundays. We look forward to seeing you there and here to explore the story behind the story. So let me finish with something that would have made no sense 30 years ago. Tweet us, email us, send us your ideas for this show.
We should do that, Aaron.
Nobody tweet us. No one send us your ideas. We don't want it. We're doing a different kind of media show here.
Yeah.
So everybody, tweet at Brian.
Yeah, tweet at Brian. Yeah.
Not us.
Yeah. Well, speaking of getting at us, you guys, we have something even better than tweeting at us, which is call-in. Come on down to call-in. We're going to be doing a call-in show. The link is in the description. Make sure you, by the way, subscribe to this. Subscribe here. It's a free way of supporting the show. Make sure you like this stream right now. And yeah, go to call-in right now. We're going to be taking your questions. Subscribe to our Substack for amazing exclusive content, ad-free content, and anything else that we want to make sure that people do.
Yeah, the Substack is at usefulidiots.substack.com.
Yeah.
And thanks everybody for tuning in. It's always great to see everybody's comments.
Yeah, and seriously, everyone who hasn't liked the stream, like it right now. And everyone who hasn't subbed, sub right now, because you deserve to be a subscriber.
Sub it, like
Treat yourself. Yeah. Yeah. And we'll see you at call-in. All righty. Bye, everyone.